Hey everybody, welcome back. Tony here, and in this video I'm going to show you how to take YouTube and turn it into a podcast. And you might be wondering, why would you want to do that? Well, in my personal case, there were YouTube videos I wanted to listen to while driving to work or walking the dog. And I also wanted the ability to do things like fast forward 30 seconds easily or rewind and play at 150% all the time. And the mobile app for YouTube just doesn't have that functionality right now. You can play in the background, but that's only if you're a premium subscriber. So with a free open source project called Podsync, getting YouTube to play as a podcast is pretty simple. There's 4 things you're going to need to be able to get Podsync and YouTube working together. 1, you have to have a system that supports Docker. Now this can be a personal server on your network. It could be a NAS box like a Synology, QNAP, or Unraid system, or it could be a cloud provider like AWS or DigitalOcean. Each one of them support Docker in their own ways, so the instructions might be a little different here or there. Second, that system has to be accessible from the internet. The way most podcasting apps work these days is it's not your device going and reading the RSS feed directly. Instead, the cloud services like Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Pocket Casts, etc., they go read the RSS feed and then they provide that data to your app. And so if those services can't access the feed that Podsync is creating, they're just not going to work. So having Podsync running like in your home network, and then you're just syncing to it when you get home for the day, chances are that's not going to work. Third, your favorite podcasting app must support custom RSS feeds. Again, we're not going to be publishing these feeds to a network of podcast apps. So the app you're using must support the ability to add a custom RSS feed. Patreon has a good knowledge base article. I'll link to it in the description below. And they have a good list of apps that support custom feeds. And your app is probably on that list, but just go check it out to be sure. And finally, the 4th thing you're going to need is an API key to access YouTube data. Now, thankfully, these are free and easy to get, and I'll go through the steps here in a moment. Final thing to note, if you want a step-by-step written guide on how to do all of this, I do have it at my website. It's lookanotherblock.com. That will also be in the description below. So let's get started. So the first thing we're going to need is that YouTube API key. And what we're going to do is we're going to go to a website called console.developers.google.com. We're going to go over here and we're going to log in. I'll type in my password. And if you've never been to this console before, your dashboard may be a little bit different because there's no projects yet. There should be a link on the page somewhere that says create a project. In my case, I already have a few projects created, so I'm going to go through a different route and we'll get to the same steps next. So I'm just going to click on here at the top, new project. And so the first thing you have to do is create a project. And in my case, I'm just going to call it Podsync with 5 ones. You can have this called whatever you want, as long as as long as it's no spaces or special characters in it. And click create. I'm going to wait for that to be created. Watching the notification over here on the right. And we're going to jump over to that project. So now that we have a project in Google's cloud platform, we needed it to be able to access APIs. And luckily there's a button right here at the top. Just click on that. And now we're going to figure out what API we want. Now there's almost 400 APIs available from Google, but we just need one. We need YouTube. So I search for YouTube. This first result here, data API, this is the one we want. So I'm just going to click on that and click enable. Wait for that to finish. And now it takes us back to our project and our API. And now that we have an API, we need to be able to get credentials so we can access it. Now, if you're just doing this for yourself and maybe like a few family members, you should never have a problem with overusing the YouTube API. Now, if you're trying to create like a cloud platform to do this, which the original creator of Podsync actually did for a while, you'll start running into issues, and like him, you may get your API keys revoked. But I wouldn't worry about that if it's just for a personal project with like 2 or 3 feeds and 1 or 2 devices. So I'm just going to click create credentials, and I'm going to search for YouTube. And then what data will we be accessing? We're just going to access public data, which is like the channels, the playlist, any playlist that's available from the internet. We're not concerned about a particular user's email address or other demographic data. We just want the channels and the playlist so we can actually just iterate through those and create RSS feeds. I'm going to click next, and that's it. We now have an API key. I'm going to copy this, and I'm just going to paste it over here in Notepad and save that for later because we need that for Podsync's config file. And click done. All right, so the next thing is we need to get Podsync up and running. And I'm going to be doing that on a Ubuntu 2004 server virtual machine. But the process, like I said, it should be pretty similar no matter what platform you use. Other thing to note, here is the project for Podsync at GitHub. Here's the developer MXVP. And in here, his README file is very good. He goes through all of the things that Podsync supports. Here's a link to another guide on how to get the API key. Here is an example of the config file that works with Podsync. There's a lot of settings in here that you can add or not add, and I'll go through some of them for this demo. And finally, you can go through and get down here and it'll show you what the command you need to run to get running in Docker. So that's exactly what we're going to do. So I'm going to jump over to the virtual machine and we'll log into it. And this is just like I said, it's a fresh installation of Ubuntu 2004 server. And the first thing I need to do on this system is actually install Docker. So that's pretty simple if you've used Ubuntu before. Sudo apt install docker.io. Type in my password. Confirm I want to install all the things needed for Docker. Just waiting for a moment. And it should finish up any second now. Okay. The next thing I'm going to need is both the internal and the external IP address of the Ubuntu server. So the external, by external, I mean the public IP address for my home network when I'm connected to the internet. So I'm just going to type in IP address to get the internal IP address of the server. That's this link right here, this Ethernet 0. Copy that. I'm just going to paste it over here in my notepad for a moment. And now I need to get the external IP address. So with the help of Google, somebody shared this command for dig, which goes and asks OpenDNS to resolve my public IP address. And I'm going to copy that out. And now the next thing I need to do is actually start creating a folder for all of Podsync's data to live in. So I'm going to put it under opt. You can put it under user or user local. It's up to you. Just make sure it's in a safe place that's not going to cause system conflicts. So like I said, I'm using opt. So I'm going to do sudo opt podsync. And now that we have that, we need to create a config file. So I'm just going to use nano opt podsync config.toml. And this is a basic config you need to get Podsync running. Like I said, there's a lot more commands available or settings available in the config file, but this is kind of the minimum you need to get running. So up here, we'll go through some of them. So port, this is what port Podsync's going to attach itself to. In this case, you can use anything from 1025 to 65535. Default here is 8080. I'm just going to keep using that. Data directory only changes if you're not running Podsync inside Docker, which you can completely do if you want. But in this case, we'll just leave it app data. The external IP address. So like I said, I'm going to go get that from my notepad. paste that in there. YouTube token. I'm just going to put the YouTube token in that I got from earlier. And now let's go down to feeds. So you can have multiple feeds. You can have pretty much as many as you want. You can't, when each feed corresponds to a given channel, group, user on YouTube, or playlist, you can't really combine multiple together into one feed. You're gonna have to rely on your podcasting app to do that for you. But we can go through here, and like personally what I do is I have an unlisted playlist where if I find a video I want to listen to later, I just add it to that playlist. But you can go in here and you can go get, for example, like if I wanted to listen to all the videos from Gamers Nexus, we can do that. So one thing to note, once you get a certain size on YouTube, you can get a custom channel name like Gamers Nexus has here. If you look down here in the corner, it's C/Gamers Nexus. Those URLs don't work. You have to have the UID of the channel or the playlist for Podsync to be able to read it. So the fastest way to get that for a big channel like Gamers Nexus is just go start playing a video. And now if you hover over the name here, you see that the channel is now, the URL is now channel/its UID. So I'm just going to copy that, go back over here. I'm going to paste it in to the URL. Page size, this determines how many videos that are going to be downloaded by Podsync. By default in the config file is 50. I don't need that many. I'm just going to download 5, like the last 5 videos. How often do you want to update? 12 hours is fine for me. Quality, high or low. I use high because I'm using the audio format. But you could actually do video podcasts if you wanted to, and you can do high or low qualities. And then cleanup. How many videos or how many episodes do you want to keep in the RSS feed? In my case, I'm only downloading 5 videos. I only want to keep the last 5, but this is all your preference. You can change it however you want. Database, leave this alone. You need this if you want to use the cleanup feature of Podsync. So it's actually like deleting old episodes off the server whenever new ones come in. Self-update, this is for downloading YouTube DL. It's set to true by default. Honestly, YouTube DL doesn't really update that often, so you could probably leave it off and be okay. I mean, the last time YouTube DL was updated was this month in December 2021, and before that was like June of this year. So it's completely up to you. So now that I have a config file, I want to save that out. And the next thing we need to do is actually get Docker up and running. So now we have Docker installed, and we have a config file for Podsync. So to get Podsync actually running under Docker, we're going to do sudo docker run. We're going to do detach. I'm going to give it a name, and we're going to call it Podsync. And this is just so it's easier to reference the container inside Docker, and we're not having to rely on the unique ID of it. We're going to publish the ports that we want to map from the internal Docker container to the server itself. So the first part of this is the port of the server we're attaching to. So this is the actual server itself. And then the second part of it is the port that we're attaching from the Docker container. So we have Podsync set to listen to port 8080, and now we're mapping port 8080 of the server to port 8080 of the Docker container. We now need to map some volume information. So the volume information is how you attach like data that you've saved on the server and get it accessible by the container. So for example, we're going to make the opt Podsync data folder. It's going to map to inside the Docker container. It will map to app data. We need a second volume. We're going to map the opt Podsync config file to app fig toml. We'll set the restart to unless stopped. You can set this to always if you wanted to. I like using unless stopped personally for just small projects like this. And then finally, we need to get the image of Podsync from Docker. So there's one thing you need to know about this. The version of YouTube DL that's used by Podsync right now has a bug in it where the downloads are very, very slow. For example, a 30-minute video on YouTube can take 10 to 15 minutes to download by YouTube DL. And if you have a long video that you want to download that's like an hour, hour and a half, those actually may fail and time out before they're done downloading. There's a few fixes out there, that, and the best one I found so far is to use a different fork of YouTube DL called YT-DLP. If you go over here to YouTube, or GitHub, there's actually a fork of the project of Podsync by FQX that actually uses YT-DLP. So I've seen that the downloads are much faster with YT-DLP. And so this is I'm actually going to use this fork. I'm not going to use the actual official image of Podsync. So what I'm going to do is now that I'm on this project, I'm going to go down here to packages, and I'm going to get the location of the image, which is in a GitHub marketplace type thing. I'm not sure. It's githubcr.io, and you can, like I said, just go to the GitHub repository for FQX, and you'll be able to get this URL. Back over here, I'm going to paste that in, and then that's our command. So we have docker run detached, so it's going to start it, and it's going to just disconnect from it and let it run in the background. Name is Podsync. We're going to map port 8080 of the container to port 8080 of the server. We're going to map the data folder of the container to a data folder on the server. We're going to map the config file inside the container to a config file on the server. We're going to always restart unless we manually stop it. And this is the Docker image we're going to use, which is Podsync with YT-DLP. So hit enter. And so now it is downloading all the stuff it needs, including YT-DLP, FFmpeg, and it's done. So now we can go watch the status of the Docker image and see what a Docker container and see what it's doing. So I'm going to do sudo docker logs podsync, and I'm going to follow it. So we'll let this run for a few minutes, and then I'll come back and I'll show you the next few steps. Okay. So all the downloads are done. For some reason, Podsync, the first time you run it, it always downloads like one less of how many videos you wanted. But the next time it updates, it's going to get that 5th video. But you can see here, it successfully updated the feed for ID 1. And it only took, 1 minute, 45 seconds. If we'd actually used the official YouTube DL application, in my testing, it's taken like 45 minutes to an hour to actually just download these 4 videos and process them. So YT-DLP really takes care of that problem. Now that we've got that all taken care of, the next thing to do is just go check and see if the RSS feed actually exists. So I'm going to go over here to web browser, and I'm going to type in the IP address of the server. I'm going to type in the port that we mapped everything to and hit enter. And here we have a few things here. We have an ID1 directory, and you can see there's our videos that are now MP3 format. We have an XML file, which has all of our all of the videos that are now a podcast. And there's an OPML file if you wanted to take all of these different feeds and import them into your favorite RSS reader or podcasting app. I've already done. The next thing to do would be to do port mapping on your router to get port 8080 accessible from the internet. Now, every router, the instructions are going to be different, so I'm not going to go into the details. I've already done it on my home router, and so I'm just going to jump over to the next part of this, which is making sure it's accessible from the internet. So I'm just going to type in the external IP address of my network and see if this all loads. So and again, it's loading up. And if I go here, still loads. I can hit F5 just to verify it. And the next thing I need to do is just add this to my podcast app of choice. For this demo, I'm just going to use the podcast app from Google on an Android phone. So get this record started. And now I'm going to open up podcasts. I'm going to click on library here on the right, bottom right. I'm going to tap subscriptions. And I'm going to click this little link up here in the top right for adding a subscription. I'm going to type in the URL for Pocket Casts. Whoop. Okay, 192. All right, so now if I hit subscribe, there it is. There's the RSS feed I just created with Pocket Cast inside of Google Podcasts. And so now I can scroll down here to this video here and I can start playing it.
News recap for the week. This week is
and that's it. That's all there is to it. I now have a podcast form of Gamers Nexus, of the Gamers Nexus YouTube channel. That's all there is, guys. If you want written instructions on how I did all of this, I have it over at my website, lookanotherblog.com. That'll also be in the description below. And until next time, have fun.